Having children sounds like a very wonderful idea, doesn't it? Well, it is very natural for a person to see the idea of having children and becoming a father or a mother as a wonderful idea, because in the end, like any living organism, our natural instincts insist on us to pass on our genes. What is the purpose of life? If we speak from an evolutionary point of view, the purpose of life is to survive and try to stay alive and pass on our genes. But as human beings, we have something that no other living being has, which is critical thinking and hyper-awareness. That's why we have a lot of things in life that no other living being has. For example, clothes. Clothes are a purely human invention. All living things live naked, but we invented the concept of clothes. There are things in our lives as human beings that are not necessarily an external natural product, but a personal human product. Antinatalism is a philosophical view that procreation is an immoral action, and this idea conflicts with the evolutionary purpose of living organisms. The concept of birth negation can be traced back to ancient Greece, which then had an influence on European literature and philosophy that continues to this day. In the 20th century, the concept of procreation negation arose. Ancient India had a third type of negation known as reincarnation negation. This form of negation is still used by Theravada Buddhists to this day. In Christianity, the Marcionites believed that the visible world was an evil creation of the demiurge Yahweh, who was cruel, ruthless, envious, and angry. People must reject him, abandon his world, and not create people, and trust in the good God of mercy, foreign and distant according to their beliefs. Birth, according to Ankratites, leads to death. People must abstain from procreation in order to defeat death and not produce fresh fodder for death. According to the Manichaeans and Bogomils and the Cathars, procreation sentenced the soul to imprisonment for evil matters. They considered reproduction as an agent of an evil deity, a descent, or a demon that enslaves the divine element of matter and thus causes it to suffer. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer encouraged the idea of anti-natalism when he said, "If children were brought into the world by an act of pure reason alone, would the human race continue to exist? Would not a man rather have so much sympathy with the coming generation as to spare it the burden of existence, or at any rate not take it upon himself to impose that burden upon it in cold blood?" When we think about anti-natalism, a lot of people think that whoever takes this position is only a depressed individual. We see a lot of people asking, for example, if the world is so bad, why don't you just commit suicide? And here lies one of the biggest misunderstandings of this philosophy. Anti-natalism does not deal with the question of whether life worth continuing or not, but rather deals with the question, is life worth starting? You may see a lot of anti-natalists who are against suicide, because suicide and non-reproduction are two completely different concepts. The reasons for rejecting suicide or accepting it are different, at least in their basis, than the reasons for rejecting or accepting anti-natalism. But when we talk about the reasons for anti-natalism, anti-natalists are different in their reasons for rejecting reproduction and considering it immoral. One of the most common reasons is that the world is overpopulated. So they argue with the question, why do we bring more people if there is an imbalance between the world's population and the amount of resources available in the first place? Another reason is that there are so many children who are orphaned or have unknown parents. So why would we produce more children and not adopt if there are millions of children who are already in need for parents? One of the reasons also is suffering in life, and this is the most common reason. So why do we have children in a world full of pain and suffering? Anti-natalists who embrace this reason see that suffering is inevitable and avoidable in the world, and that this child that you gave birth to will undoubtedly suffer, and thus you are subjecting him to suffering when he did not need to be born in the first place. This reason kind of takes a form of gambling. Many people say that life is beautiful as well, so how can you deprive the child of experiencing pleasure? So the gambling part goes as follows. If you gave birth to a child, he will exist and will have an awareness and a nervous system that will make him experience pain and pleasure. But if you did not give birth to a child, the child would not exist in the first place. So the child would not experience any pain or pleasure. So do you gamble and bring the child into existence to experience pleasure even though he will experience pain as well? Or do you not bring him to experience nothing? Anti-natalists think that not experiencing both pain and pleasure is better than experiencing pleasure and pain. And in addition to this, the child already does not exist. So the child will not be deprived of pleasure because he does not exist in the first place to be deprived of anything. One of the reasons is also that some anti-natalists see existence as an option. And since the child does not exist, it is immoral to impose existence on this child. Some can argue and say that you impose non-existence on this child. But the difference is that if you gave birth to the child, he would become existent. So if he grows up and sees that he does not want to exist, then you have imposed existence on him. While if you did not give birth to him, he would not exist. So how can you impose non-existence on a person who does not exist in the first place? Another reason for anti-natalists is selfishness. Anti-natalists argue that having children is a completely selfish action. You want to have children for selfish reasons, whether the reason is that you want someone to take care of you when you grow old, or you want to see what your children look like, or you want to have a family, or for some religious reasons, or whatever the reason is, it is selfish reason. And it is immoral to bring a new person to life to fulfill your selfish desires. In the end, in my opinion, I see that life is a race to death. From the first moment you are born, you start dying. I see that the world is full of suffering and pain that no one needs to be forcibly brought into existence to experience. Poverty, homelessness, wars, accidents, physical and mental illnesses, religious extremism, racism, national extremism, hatred, bullying, sexism, crimes starting from theft ending with murder. All these things make life a miserable place. No human being deserves to impose this existence on. Yes, there is beauty and pleasure in life, but it is not enough to cover the amount of pain and suffering. Life may be worth continuing, but it definitely is not worth starting. So, my advice is masturbate, don't procreate.